Welcome to the Kings and Priests podcast. I'm Serge DeRosa. Last week, Unica Jonathan shared with our community on being uncapped, like God's kingdom uncapped within your world, within your life, and what that looks like. And I started seeing that many times when we read of the promises and the blessings of God, and even some of those that have come to us personally through relationship with God and communion with His Spirit, we filter those by our perspectives, our expectations, and especially by the way promises and blessings have been manifested in other people's lives around us. For example, we know that the Lord wants us to be successful, to be living in a life that is abundant. But many times our perspective of that comes from the way we view other people to be walking in that. And I know for like the minister circles, for ministers, many ministers might see success being a preacher who has a full schedule, who has a packed itinerant, who has millions of followers and preaching in these big mega churches. And it's like, well, is that really God's fulfillment of His promise to you? Or is that just a distorted expectation of how that promise is fulfilled in your life? And I hope I'm making sense here. Because what I'm seeing is like, when we let the way promises and blessings are poured out on other people or manifested in other people's lives, and we let that be our standard for the way the promises and blessings are poured out on us, it can lead to a very frustrating place because we think that's the way it needs to be and that's the way that it's supposed to be. But what if it's not? I was thinking about Adam and Eve, and Adam hearing the promises of God for him and how he had nothing that was before him that put a standard to that. All that was with Adam in the moment that God gives him a promise is that promise alone, is the word alone. That was his standard. So when he faced, let's say, a situation that has the potential to look like it's the opposite of the promise of God, I'm sure he would rest in the fact that, well, this is what God says, so this is the way it's going to be played out. And that trial or that situation didn't take away from the promises of God. He just stood in that unshakable place of knowing what God said, His promise, and there's no other way this could be. There's no other option but for the promise of God to be fulfilled in this situation. There was no standards or perspectives on the table. And what does it look like in our lives to take the standards and the expectations off the table and take the promise of God and let it be played out in your life in a way that is unique to your relationship with God? What does that look like? And I bring up Unica because this is an uncapping moment for me. What does it look like for me? I can remember decades ago where I was in the lawn care business, and it was the most money I'd ever made in my life. I was busy, I had lots of clients, and I always had cash on me. And yeah, I didn't have thousands in the bank account, but I felt like I was abundantly prosperous. And for me, that was amazing that I was in a place where I didn't worry about what I had to eat that night, what was in my cabinets. To me, I had more than enough. To me, I was living in the promises and blessings of God. And I remember in that season of life going to a church service, and the preacher was preaching about what it looks like to be prosperous and to have more than enough. And it's so interesting because I walked in that church service feeling so blessed, so prosperous, so abundantly supplied for. But I walked out feeling like I didn't have enough. Like I needed to start pushing and striving to have more. That I really wasn't in a place of blessing. And that messed me up for a while. It took me a long time to come out of that. Why? Because that pastor put a standard on what the promises of God looks like being played out in my life. He put his expectation of what abundance looks like on me. And it took away from the blessing that I was really walking in. It took away from that. You know, your relationship with God is unique to you. And I see this with my kids. Every one of my kids, I have a different relationship with each and every one of them. I handle each and every one of my kids in a different way. There are some things I would do to one kid that wouldn't work well with another one of my kids. My relationship with my kids is unique to each and every one of them. And that's how it is with our relationship with God. God's relationship with you is unique to you. It doesn't look like everybody else's. And it shouldn't. That's where the frustration comes in. When you're trying to make it all fit in the box. When you're trying to make your relationship look like someone else's. But your relationship with God, God's relationship with you is unique to you. And that plays into the promises and blessings. The way those promises and blessings are played out in your life is unique to you. Don't let someone else's standards or expectations put a cap on how the promises and blessings are played out in your life, are manifested in your life. It's unique to you. You think about the great men of the Bible, how Abraham had this walk with God that we don't see anyone else have. Moses. We see little hints of Enoch, who walked in places with God that no one else walked in. Look at King David. What about Elijah? Elijah walked in things that no one before him walked in. He didn't have that standard before him. Why was he able to walk in those things? In such supernatural, over-the-top encounters with God and His Spirit. Some amazing, awesome manifestations that we've never seen before play out in his life because he wasn't bound or capped by the standards and the expectations. He just took God at His word. Look at John the Baptist, a ministry like none other on this earth. And we see it with Paul, who went to a people that in the eyes of a Jewish person, the people group he came out of, in their eyes, that the blessing did not belong to the Gentiles. But Paul saw something because he became uncapped, and he saw something that went beyond the standards of that day. And he saw that God was reaching out to the world, to all people. And Paul started to share that message of reconciliation with the world. Your relationship is unique to you. Uncap it. Uncap it. The promise and blessings of God are unique to you. How it's played out, how it's manifested, it comes through a unique way. Don't let your expectations and your standards be the thing that caps the promises and blessings. Uncap it. Let them be manifested in your life in a way that is unique to you, in a way that you're led by the Spirit to walk this out and to see God manifest His abundance in your life in a way that is unique to you. You know, I'm sitting here thinking of so many prophecies I've gotten through the years, and as I've seen some of those come to pass, it never is in the way that I think it's going to be manifested. I don't know that I've ever seen a prophecy fulfilled in my life in the way that I thought it would be fulfilled. It's always different. Why? Because I had my expectations slapped all over that prophecy. And the deal is, when we have our standards of what a fulfillment of a promise in our lives is supposed to look like, it can very easily bring us to that place of frustration. And you know what? That standard can be so built up within you that you can be walking in the promise and blessing of God and not even recognize it, because it doesn't look like the standard that was put before you. Take the cap off. Put the standard away. Trust in His word to you only. You know, I've never been one of these guys that's been big on the word of the year, right? Never been one of those guys. And several years ago, that thing about me, like, there shouldn't be no words of the year. It's just all part of life, and every day is the same, and every day is holy, you know. The Lord kind of blasted me with 3 words that year, and He fulfilled them. He fulfilled all 3. And ever since then, the Lord's been giving me a word for the year, right? And the deal is, I never search it out. I never look for it. And sometimes they'll come in November. Sometimes they'll come in January. And this year, I never gave thought to it. Never even put one thought into, oh, what's the word for the year? But this week, something dropped in my spirit. And it's a word I cannot get away from. And I want to share it because I feel like this goes beyond me. In other words, it's not just for me. And I know a lot of you listening, and even my local Urban Eden community, will resonate with this. But what I hear in the spirit for 2025 is that this will be the year of the blow up. This is the year of the blow up. But consider everything we just talked about. Because for many people, when I say this will be the year of the blow up, some will think fame. Some will think, oh man, we're getting ready to make a lot of money. Some will think, oh, our ministry is going to blow up. And, you know, it may be. It may be. It may be all those. It may be one of those, but it may be none of those. What if the year of the blow up is God saying that the revelation will become such a part of you that your entire being just blows up into bliss and paradise, into the place of the bridal garden with Him, fully functioning and engaging in that place? What if that's the year of the blow up? We need to take the expectations and the standards off the table and allow the manifestations of God's promises and blessings in our lives happen in a way that is unique to us. And when you allow that to happen, in the way those promises are meant to be fulfilled in your life, it will do just that. It will bring fulfillment. It will bring completeness. For those that resonate with the year of the blow up, if that resonates with you, if that is a word for you, my message to you today is to don't put a cap on that. Don't put expectations and standards on what that looks like. When you encounter what looks like maybe a setback, what looks like maybe the opposite of what the Spirit has spoken to you, don't let that move you. It doesn't matter. Don't look with your natural eyes only. Keep your eyes on what you've seen in the Spirit, and that is the year of the blow up. And my prayer is that God blow away any expectation that you have. That God uncap any standard that you've put on His word for you, on His promise for you, on His blessing for you. And you experience a relationship with God, His promise and blessings that you experience the kingdom of God in an uncapped way, in a way that is unique to you, and you walk in the fullness of the place God has called you to walk in this life. Kings and Priests Podcast is a ministry of Urban Eden. To learn more about us, to get resources, and to find details on our monthly gatherings in Tulsa, Oklahoma, visit the website urbanedencmty.com and consider sowing a financial seed to help us spread the message of God's kingdom. Visit the website for details.